So, Taylor, Chapter 90 funds, they come from the state to cities and towns to pay for infrastructure. They're delivered every year. This year, Gloucester has already received over $656,000 for infrastructure, right? We hear the people in the debates, the candidates in the debates, talking about roads and potholes. They need to be fixed. Is there an issue with funding infrastructure or fixing potholes in the city? Are there enough funds? Is this a legitimate candidate complaint?
That's a great question. And, as far as the reporting goes at the Gloucester Daily Times, they get those funds, they have the money, they do those capital improvement projects, to additionally get more money as they're trying to figure out what's the most pressing projects in the city. The DPW doesn't just go around and look at random streets and say that one needs fixing, that one doesn't. They have a list, they have a plan in place. The problem is that these things take time. We see Trask Street has been going on far over its expected timeline. We're looking at, the continued traffic, on Eastern Avenue. They're trying to figure out these different projects, especially as they're also building up infrastructure in the buildings in the city. So that's also causing things. And so, potholes are a problem. Potholes, Gloucester, the roads are bad, but that has been something that's been going on forever. And so that's hard, even down Washington Street where we're located, right off where we're located, there's been construction going on for years. And so that's something where, we don't know the intricacies behind, what the projects look like, the timeline, what it looks like to do the paving, the demolition work, the lining of the streets. But we do know, that this is not a new complaint. And maybe it's a cheap shot for candidates to talk about because, everyone's going to side with, yes, we need, if you can promise us that our curbing is going to be great, that you're going to have great roads, that anyone will vote. But I think with the candidate lineup this year is everyone's saying that, right? There's no one's popping out saying, here's a definitive plan on how we're going to fix the roads. Because at the end of the day, is the mayor can, find the grants or, connect the people who could help bring in more money. But we'll only have one DPW. We only have, a certain amount of crews that can get down. Maybe they can, hire out a few additional, but depending on bids of, what that looks like. But also, it's just the manpower. It's looking at that as well. So it's an interesting question. It's an interesting topic. But I think the good thing that you pointed out, Heather, is the fact that we get this money annually. Every year. $656,000 is a lot of money. Maybe it's not like millions of dollars, but that's a great starting point to say, okay, what can we prioritize this funding to first? Right. So it's, if no candidate said, our roads are bad, then I think we'd have an issue because we can all identify that, they do need fixing, but they're also giving out information from what they're hearing when they're knocking on doors. When they knock on doors and ask people, what are the issues that I need to focus on? It's that, so it's not their ideas, it's the residents that they're talking to. Right. So, and I mean, I think one candidate in particular that has really focused on this is Rob Russell. He's really keyed on this because for him, this has been an issue with him and his family on their streets. And so I think it really depends on where you live, and for candidates, they'll really heighten that debate topic if it impacts them and if everyone they're talking to kind of echoes that as well.
Right.
And we've also heard from Mayor Thakin even talking about having to do work at the DPW yard itself on Poplar Street. So interesting stuff. Yeah, it is amazing how often that topic comes up year after year after year. It's what people are really after. So, okay, thanks for that, Taylor. Okay, the next topic, Heather? Housing?
Yes. Okay. So affordable housing was a subject in, I think, both of the debates, perhaps. It comes up all the time, right? Tell us what the state of affordable housing is in the city of Gloucester.
Yeah, so I guess we can talk about it in the scope of developers. So, right, when I say the word developers, I think most residents who have lived here a long time maybe cringe a little bit because they've seen just how much that's changed the face of Gloucester over the years. I haven't been here long, but from what the people I've talked to, Gloucester used to look a lot different. There's a lot of more focused on the history and the mom and pop shops, the smaller homes here in the city. But according to what's expected from the state is, until a city has a 10% housing stock in the city, developers can, bypass certain zoning regulations.
Affordable housing.
Yeah. They can bypass certain zoning, saying that we will give this amount of our, new complex to be affordable housing. And so they can bypass some of those zonings as of right now. They just have to have a, 30% affordable housing. Again, those numbers vary a little bit here and there. And for Gloucester, I believe we're at about 8%, 7 or upward of 8%. So, we're not at 10%, but we're doing a lot better than maybe somewhere
vulnerable
surrounding.
to the 40B proposals.
Exactly, and we've seen that with a couple other new developments here in the city with Halyards, the new development over in the former Fuller School site.
So tell us about Halyard. How much affordable housing is there? What does that solve any of these affordable issues?
So the tricky thing is the numbers. Is I can't remember exactly. I believe it's 30 to 35%. Of those areas are affordable housing. But the problem is that it's hiked up quite a bit. It's not cheap to live there, and I know a lot of complaints I've heard from residents and politicians here in the city is, that's not affordable. $2,500 is not affordable to a lot of people, and so we're also looking at other projects here in the city. We have Harbor Village that is, that's Action and North Shore CDC, specifically affordable housing. We're looking at the old YMCA spot on Middle Street, that's going to be affordable housing. So the city is trying to, and, I don't think developers are, maybe we're kind of antagonizing them maybe a little bit. That's always my question, is how much are they really trying to get around the system? And maybe they are, but I guess looking at affordable housing and seeing that this is a big ticket issue, it affects so many people, and it affects those who have lived here for a long time who can't afford to stay here. And that's the thing, is that a lot of people want to stay here, they want to keep this place, and they don't want this just to be a place that becomes something that people are, it's called a bedroom community, right? When people are here and they're leaving, they want people to stay here and really thrive and grow families and have generations like it's been like in the past. But when you're hiking it up and you're having big houses and a lack of affordable housing in the city, it just makes it harder to live here.
Well, let's just add on to that conversation a question about zoning, because I know the mayor brought that up in one of the debates, saying that she is working with the planning board to help change the zoning regulations. And I know the governor also really wants that to happen and has passed legislation to make it easier to change zoning regulations. So do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so the problem that was there and that the planning board and the state are trying to work on is that Gloucester is lumped into about 110 communities who have like an average, affordable medium income. And that's an average of about 110 communities that vary. And so if Gloucester, if the average income is much lower than all those other communities, it's still going to get hiked up of what the definition of affordability is. And so the planning board at Gloucester has been working tirelessly to try to address that issue, especially as we got the news of Governor Baker also trying to make that a more effective way for each municipality to focus on what affordable means to them. And to go into a lot of specifics, they've been, fleshing this out, but they're working on 5 different strategies to try to figure out, how can we hit each one of these so that we can make it not only affordable, but also making it so that as people come into the city to build, that, they're focused on the idea that this is Gloucester and this is a community of people, not just places to build. And I know the one thing that I covered quite heavily at the beginning was looking at this revising the inclusionary housing ordinances and seeing when, developers come in and they're wanting to build their buildings and they have to give a certain section to be affordable housing. What is the expectations for what that affordable housing looks like based off of the rest of the apartment buildings? So it has to, meet according to this new thing. They have to be kind of married.
Integrated.
Integrated. And so you're not just giving somebody a dump and, giving someone a 5-star hotel. And so it's cool to see how the planning board is working so hard to make this possible. And they're working with, outsized resources because this is a part of a bigger affordable housing plan that they're working on. And it's something that, I encourage anybody to watch their meetings or, look at their meeting minutes because it is quite incredible. And it's things that impact so many different communities because it's expensive to live in Massachusetts and it's expensive to live on the North Shore. And I have so many people who say this is beautiful and how lucky we are and how I am to have grown up here. But now as I'm growing up and I'm like, do I want to live here long term? It's like, well, can I afford it?
Right.
And so I think it's prudent for anybody who is living and paying taxes and wants to learn more to definitely do their research because it's pretty cool.
And appropriate talk, we're having this conversation in the shadow of the Harbor Village development
Yeah,
right next
right.
door,
Yeah,
actually part of Action. So yeah, interesting stuff there. That's going to be a hot topic for years to come. So okay, thanks for that, Taylor. Should we touch upon City Hall management? There's been a lot of kerfuffle. That's a word you like to use a lot, Heather. About what's going on internally over on Dale Avenue.
Yeah, so I guess do we want to focus specifically on the latest request for city auditing, for looking at the different department heads? You know, as we know here in the city, really recently there's been a request from city councilors to do an audit of the legal and HR departments, you know, as they're handling a lot of really sensitive topics here in the city and money's being exchanged left and right and trying to understand what that actually looks like.
A lot of money.
A lot of money, yeah, not just a little bit. And looking especially as the city's dealing with lawsuits and navigating that, you know, dealing with, you know, hostile work complaints, all this different stuff that's happening internally. So I reached out to Kenny Costa, who's the city auditor, just to ask him a little bit, you know, what does it look like to audit departments, and what is your department doing to kind of focus and key in on this as city councilors are requesting this for these specific departments. And what he said was, he noted that all departments are audited annually. So annually.
Yeah,
And so, you know, that's, I believe the number's like 26, 24, you know, it's a lot of departments are audited annually.
When does that work stop?
Yeah, exactly. And so looking at that, and not only do they do it annually, but they've actually received an award from the state every single year since 2017 for their audit statements. And so that's showing, you know,
It
that
says a lot.
it
right
says
there.
a lot
Yeah.
that they get that, and that's, you know, that's outside people. They hired for this most recent audit of 2020. They had a Woburn-based organization come in and do their audit. So it's not like they're auditing themselves. They're bringing people from outside to do this work, to really do a fair assessment of what's been going on. And so as they're doing that and looking at that, and I know that the FY 2020 audits was conducted by the Woburn-based community, and the 2021 one is closing the books, and they should be releasing that one at the end of this year or the beginning of next year. So, you know, I know the city councilors are looking for the information, but also the reality is that they're already being audited and the money's already being spent as part of this annual audit. So we might just have to sit back and wait to kind of see what's been going on there.
Yeah, but it's hard to say that there's gross mismanagement.
Right.
When, you know, the audits are happening annually since 2017, and they've been fine, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I think it's also important to note, just, you know, a big thing that's been at the mayoral debates this year is like talking about what would management look like under new leadership. And, you know, that's been a big thing, is especially Greg Verga has been using that as his campaign. You know, Safathia Romeo-Taken has been citing just how she would, you know, use what they're doing and use the trainings, and that, you know, she'd be, you know, she stated to the first mayoral debate that the first 60 days she'd be doing that to welcome the city councilors in and train them and educate them on kind of how things run. You know, and so Greg is kind of citing a little bit of the kerfuffling that's been going on under Romeo-Taken's leadership, but at the same time as Romeo-Taken's kind of, you know, citing, you know, here's what we might do to maybe unify the group. So those are two interesting conversations. And then you have a lot of the other candidates are just looking at maybe not necessarily the managerial side, but how can we collaborate with local businesses, or how can we, you know, reinvigorate downtown or the harbor, or, you know, affordable housing. So it's interesting to see people's focus on City Hall, and how we need to identify that, you know, we have so many voters and so many residents here in the city, but the interdepartmental, you know, communication that happens, a lot of people don't see in the city. I mean, I know I don't see everything that happens in the city, you know, within the city departments. And so understanding that as voters go out, you know, they might experience part of what's being done in the departments as they're getting grants, as they're doing projects. But also there's each individuals who are in each department, you know, making part of that cog of that wheel that's working to make all of that happen. So understanding that there are relationships that, you know, ebb and flow and grow, and maybe, you know, have hardships, and navigating that is something that needs to be addressed in the city. And that's a big part of being the head chief, is being able to navigate that and support, and whoever's going to be the next mayor, or, you know, continue to be the mayor. It's just a question of how they will handle that next year.
Well said. All right, next topic. Heather, I know this means a lot to you, the impact of neighborhoods.
Yes, so we want to talk about neighborhoods. This is a city of very strong neighborhoods, right? And yet the city needs to get things done. And there have been a couple of instances, for instance, the Espresso building, when the neighborhood came out and had all kinds of issues with that development project, and decisions were made. And then, of course, the school consolidation project, which is in a really strong downtown neighborhood, and there are issues there, even appeals as we speak, right? But the city needed to make a decision that was good for the city. So you want to just talk about the neighborhood issues, what you've seen in your reporting over the years about how the city and the neighborhoods are navigating, to use your word, each other.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the three big topics I can think of is 116 East Main Street. We have the school consolidation on 11 Webster Street, and we have the Trask Street, road improvement project. All three of those have different instances where some people get, the brunt of the work on their yards, and the other people, don't even see the construction workers. And so it's tricky because you're seeing all these different conversations and everybody's affected differently, and you don't know what's actually going on until you're woken up at 2 a.m. in the morning by, whatever's going on. And so that's hard because, for us who don't live on those streets, we don't know. And so I think it's important, though, to key in the school consolidation is an interesting one. And I think, something that we've talked about is these debates that have been happening, no one's really talked about. They've talked about schools and they've talked about education, but they haven't talked about school consolidation. And I think, based off of my reporting and understanding the situation, maybe one of the reasons why they haven't talked about those is because of the neighborhood-city relationships and how kind of toxic it is. It's hard. There's a lot of back and forth. They're in the middle of a lawsuit. We thought it was all over, and then the residents went and appealed, even though Veterans Building is being torn down as we speak. And so it's one of those things that no one's ever going to be happy. And I think from the city side, they have to pick and choose their battles and try to figure out what's best. They're looking to see what's best for the city. The residents are seeing, what's best for the city as they're living the life of those. But I think it's also identifying too that, a lot of these all these elected officials are city residents too. And so they maybe they don't experience it in their ward, but, someone could come around and say, hey, I want to build a school here, and then they have to deal with it, 10 years down the line.
Right.
So there's a lot there. There's a lot in the neighborhood and city relationships. I mean, even if you just go on to a city council meeting and do the public comments, that's my favorite part of those meetings because you really get to hear for those residents who are willing or able to get online or before that, go in person, they want to speak their mind, and that's when you get to really hear the rawness of people, whether it's for the, praise of the city or whether it's, you need to fix this, you need to do that. And I want to cite, one instance that I think was a really interesting part of my reporting this year was the West Gloucester firing range. That one was fascinating because we can go back and forth about it. It was closed, it was open, it was closed, it was open, and it was pretty much the city saying, this is a done deal, we're going to reopen this. And the residents kept on talking. There was one public comment section. They were going to have all this other kind of controversial topics about something totally different in the rest of the city council meeting. The health department was going to talk about COVID, all this different stuff. And the West Gloucester residents came on for public comment, and I think took over an hour and a half of that meeting. And they just laid it all out. And they brought in attorneys' perspectives. They, really did their homework. And now there's no firing range. And so it just goes to say that, it is tumultuous at times, the relationship between, the neighborhoods and the city. And it's interesting to see how the city is, in that instance particularly, just how much they shifted once the information came out. Yeah. And maybe that's also it, just identifying that sometimes we just don't see the bigger picture. And then once you do, you're willing to pivot. And I think it's on both sides, understanding that we're going to continue to learn new information. And that's part of growth within any city. And that'll be interesting. I'm really curious to know what the big ticket topics will be this upcoming year with the new politics and new politicians involved, new ones and old ones. And what we'll be looking at, especially as we see the new school be built, what ends up happening with espressos, and what ends up happening with a lot of other parts of our city. So.
Yeah, I have to say that it's been a little bit disappointing not hearing candidates talk about these more granular, gritty issues. Not that they have their challenges because they don't know what the questions are in advance, But it would be interesting to be able to talk to them about, what do you think about what happened with the firing range or the espresso project? Or maybe they certainly can't comment really on those things at this point, but just, I don't know, rent control, empty buildings downtown, although that has come up.
Yeah, they seem to be put in a tough position.
They are.
And I know the topics beforehand, they're on time restrictions. There's 5 other candidates they're competing for mic time with.
Yeah, and I guess one thing to point out, I'd love to know your guys' thoughts too, is like, those are important things for them to talk about, but also the fact that like a lot of those are ward counselors' territory.
True.
And the mayor can do a lot of stuff, but they're also focused on the relationships with the state and with other municipalities, where that's really a responsibility of a counselor at large or the ward counselor to handle those and try to make those things work within the government of City Hall. So, but again, it is a relationship where the mayor will be, but again, like you mentioned, they only have so much time in a debate. And if you talk about the West Gloucester firing range, you're going to miss the rest of all the other wards. So.
But they did talk about the Magnolia Pier.
They did.
That's true. Okay, great stuff there. And folks, we talked about the Veterans Memorial School demolition that's happening right now. If you're there trying to cast a ballot, you're supposed to be over at the new YMCA. That's where that voting is taking place.
Good point.
Yeah, so watch your step. All right, another topic that has come up continuously in the debates that we've seen is beach traffic and online beach passes. You want to touch upon that?
Yeah, so that one has been fascinating same thing with potholes and, paving. It's, in this city and this island, it's going to be a conversation forever because the traffic's always bad. You can try to mediate it and navigate around it, but there's been a lot of, questions of how can we, fix that
and mitigate the traffic.
And I know a couple have noted that it might be a good idea to put in beach parking passes or do online reservations and what that would look like. And the problem with that is that you might have that, but then you have people who might just be coming from out of town wanting to, and they don't have no idea, and they're having to go all the way back over the bridge and go home. And so that's one question is like, how would they navigate that? Someone did cite that Cranes Beach already does an online system, singing their praises of that works. I know I have since hearing those kind of references that I did ask a few people who use that Cranes Beach system, and they don't like it. But there are other people who probably do like it. They said the problem is that they pay to have a membership. Then they still have to go online and make those reservations. And everyone's doing that. And so by the time you try to sign up, you're only going to the beach a couple times a month. Where if you've had that membership before COVID, you're going every single day you can because you want to, squeeze out the cost of your membership.
You just get there early.
Right, you
really
just get there early, yeah. You stake out. And I think the difference between Cranes Beach and here is that Cranes Beach, you have that long, mile stretch where there's no parking. And so you really have to follow that system, and so that's maybe why it works a little bit well, and it keeps people who aren't a part of that system off the beach. Where here, I was speaking with Chief Conley last year and Safathia, and they're talking about how people will just, take Ubers, take Lyfts, and get dropped off. Right. So, even if you are doing that beach online system, that's not going to prevent people from getting onto the beach. And so it's a great idea, and I think it is innovative, and if we're talking about revenue coming in from that, sure, it's going to work. The reason why things were packed and why people were taking Ubers was because the parking was full. So, they were making money, but, the question is, I guess, how much is the revenue worth it and what's it going to look like? And do they have the functions in place to create that online system? That's a lot of money.
Expensive, yeah. Right.
It's a lot of money. So that's there's good and there's bad to all of it. Cranes Beach works for some people. It doesn't work for others. For here, we have so many beaches. So the question is where would you do that? Would it just be for Wingatersheek and Good Harbor? Would it be for everywhere? If you were going to be restricting access and everyone had to have a card with them, then you have to hire people like rangers to go around and ask people. So there's a lot of questions there, and I know a lot of candidates have mentioned that. It started out with one candidate, and then it kind of spiraled, and people caught on as they're like, this is an important topic. But again, I don't think the traffic is going away, and people are always going to come to Gloucester. It's just navigating it for the locals.
Yeah, I live in a Good Harbor Beach neighborhood, and I couldn't believe how far people were parking and walking just to get to that beach, especially last year when COVID first hit. It was miles. they were going. So, and then they expanded no parking zones around a lot of those residential streets around there. I can't wait to hear from the first person who books something online, a reservation for Good Harbor Beach, and they go down and it's peak high tide, and
there's no
everyone's on
space.
top of each other.
Yeah,
there,
right.
Yeah.
People
Right.
stand on each other's shoulders. So, all right, interesting stuff. Okay, lastly, Taylor, let's talk about the Chief Administrative Officer for City Hall. Now, we know there's the history here is Jim Destino retired in June of 2020. Nicole Kaiser was there for a little bit after Vanessa Krozik. And so what is going on? Former Essex County Sheriff Frank Cousins has been in place now for about 90 days or so, and that is about to expire. Is there any plan on the next CAO for the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I reached out to Frank just to ask that question is, are you planning to stick around? Because there's been a lot of interims and not a lot of, roots being dug into that position after Vanessa Krozik left. She was, Jim Destino was there, and Vanessa had been, within the city department for a while Jim was there. And it looked like she was going to be staying for a long term. Then all of a sudden she left. Then we had Nicole. Nicole left quite suddenly. And now we have Frank. And from what Frank's perspective was and what he told me is, the elections are coming up in November, and they're planning to keep him on until then. He's planning to stick around until they're able to solidify what politics looks like, what the mayor's office looks like for next year. And once that happens, they're kind of going to look at what a new CAO would look like. But from Frank's perspective and what he told me is that, he's been within politics, I'm sorry if I get the number wrong, I think it's like 35 years he's been within, working in different capacities here and elsewhere. And he doesn't want to miss football season and doesn't want to miss the time that he can have being what he, and I quote, free man of, retiring and spending time outside of work, outside of city politics. And so he's here to help the mayor. He was really here to focus on the budget during budget season as they didn't have a CAO during that time. And so he's going to be around a little bit longer, but I don't think we should expect to see him next year with a new round of politicians here in the city. So that's definitely one part of City Hall that we'll be following as we look more to see what does kind of this team roster look like for next year. And I'm excited to see the results for this, this primary election. But then as we go into November to really see, what is this starting to look like and what will those dynamics look like? That's what I'm so excited to see, because that really changes the game. You don't see that until January 1st runs around and we have the celebration where everyone hopefully comes together and they start to make things happen in the city, with the new team. So.
Well, great work as always, Taylor. We value your reporting and your work in our partnership with the Gloucester Daily Times, and it's going to be a pretty intense 6 weeks coming up now as we make our way towards the municipal election on Tuesday, November 2nd. Hopefully you can join us that evening from City Hall. So thanks once again for all of your commentary.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
This episode of Cape Ann Today is brought to you by Bank Gloucester. Start here, get there.